welcome everyone. If you're here for a meeting on coastal recreational bottomfish, you're in the right place. I am Lorna Wargo with the Intergovernmental Ocean Policy Team. And
sound is terrible.
Sound is terrible. Is that true for everyone? Any others? Am I coming through really scratchy?
I can hear okay.
Anybody on the...
It works. You sound good.
Okay. All right, well, I'll keep going because I'm not sure if it's... I'm in the headquarters office, so the system should be as good as it's going to get. So sorry, Phil, if it's not really clear. I'll try and make sure I'm like up to the speaker and hopefully it'll improve. So just, yeah, to let you know, we won't have Heather Hall with us today, lead for regional, there's Phil coming back in. All right, Phil, does it sound better now? All right, well, we'll continue. So yes, Lorna Wargo, Intergovernmental Ocean Policy Team. As I was saying, Heather Hall won't be able to join us today. She's at a regional director meeting over on the sunny side of the state, we learned earlier. So not experiencing all of this rain. We have several WDFW staff with us, so I'll ask them to introduce themselves. And then we can kind of orient each other to who are the rest of our callers on the meeting. So go ahead, Corey.
Thanks. Sorry, I made me pause to approve the recording. Hello, everyone. I'm Corey Niles, Intergovernmental Ocean Policy Lead. Lorna alluded to there, our group still reports to Heather Hall, who's our Region 6 Director. And all of us, to some extent here, are working on this fishery, and I'll pass it off to Whitney.
Thanks, Corey. Hi, everyone. Whitney Roberts here, also on the team, and I'm on the groundfish management team. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else on me. I think Claudia, go ahead.
Hey everybody, I'm Claudia. I'm brand new. I've only been with the team for about 3 weeks, and I'll be taking over some of Lorna's responsibilities as she retires. And I'm also on the groundfish management team with Whitney.
Thanks, Claudia. And then got Lisa Hillier.
Hello. I am Lisa Hillier. I'm in the Marine Fish Science Unit, where we help look at some of the groundfish and bottomfish in Washington. And I'm just here to observe and learn what is happening for 27-28. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. And then Erica.
There we go. Hi, I'm Erica Wayland. I work with the Ocean Sampling Program, and I too am just observing and curious what's in store for a couple years down the road.
Thanks, Erica. And I'll share that Erica is the all-important number cruncher when it comes to producing our catch estimates. So really important piece in the whole process. I think that is everybody on the agency side. So kind of going down the list here, if you would, I'll call out a phone number ending in 7172. If you can just share your name and who you are, just lets everyone kind of know who's in this meeting room together.
Yeah, Lorna, it's Dave Johnson.
Okay. Hi, Dave.
Ocean Sport Rep. Hi.
Thanks. Then we have a B. Sampson.
Good afternoon. I am a recreational fisherman and small business owner operating rental boats out of Port Angeles.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Then Chris German.
Yep, there we go. Chris German, Coast Guard.
Okay, Chris, thanks. Let's see, then Larry Phillips.
Hey everybody, Larry Phillips, American Sport Fishing Association. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Paul Moranti.
Think he's driving.
Okay. Well, I'll just say that Paul Moranti is representing probably the Westport Charter Association, and he also sits on the Groundfish Advisory Panel for the PFMC. And then that puts you next, Phil.
Phil Anderson, Westport Charter Boat Association.
Thank you. And then Rhett Weber.
Brent Weber, Mutineer Charters, Westport, Washington, Westport Charter Boat Association.
Welcome. Then Thomas. Okay. I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe hit the wrong button. He comes back in. And then we have Vice Chair.
Is that me, Butch Smith?
Hi.
Hi, Lorna. Pacific Fisheries Management Council, sit in the Washington obligatory seat and currently vice chair of the council.
Okay.
Thank you, Lorna.
Yeah, thanks, Butch. I figured that was you. So great. Anyways, we can manage hands, but for those of you that are on the phone, calling in, if I, don't pause or one of us doesn't pause when you have a question, just go ahead and speak out so that you can get your question in front of us. So for today, the purpose of the meeting is to kind of kick off our discussion of harvest limits and management measures for coastal bottomfish, emphasizing this is for 2027 and 2028. We'll talk a little bit about the management process and timeline for coastal bottomfish. For those of you that have been involved in this process, this will be very familiar, but because this is the first of a series of meetings that the agency will conduct between now and June of 2026, and it'll get posted to the website. Got another. Okay. Welcome. Oh, go ahead, Butch.
Hey, I just want to clarify, I didn't sign myself in as vice chair. I just saw that I think it's left over from the council sign in. So sorry about that. I'm trying to change it, but I don't know how. Anyway,
Okay.
I'm not that pretentious in any way. So
No,
sorry.
No problem, Butch. I assumed it was some kind of a glitch like that. So yeah, no worries. Anyways, so just to let folks know that this is just the kickoff meeting, and it'll be first of several before the end of June. This will get posted to our agency website. So yeah, again, some of the early slides they're going to be very familiar to those of you that have been around a long time, but helpful to have that information up front, especially for folks that can't join us here or don't have that background. So then we'll provide updates on bottomfish catches to date, and to provide some context for some of the discussion that we want to have around the alternatives that we're looking at for 2027 and 2028, and hopefully reserve enough time for some good discussion and opportunity for you to weigh in and ask questions at this point. So to start, the Pacific Fishery Management Council is the regional group that helps manage fisheries in federal waters off Washington, Oregon, and California. It brings together state, federal, tribal, and industry representatives, as well as the public, to discuss issues and set rules that support healthy fish populations and sustainable fishing opportunities. The council uses scientific information and stakeholder input to guide decisions on harvest limits, seasons, and conservation measures. And then within that, the council has the West Coast Groundfish Fishery Management Plan, which covers roughly 90 species and outlines the harvest policies and management measures that apply across commercial, recreational, and tribal fisheries. So as mentioned, the council is a very public and very collaborative process that brings together advisory bodies, a scientific and statistical committee, state agencies that serve on the advisory bodies and also have seats on the council itself. This includes also National Marine Fisheries in the process, the tribes, industry, and just the general public as well, environmental organizations that together develop fishery management recommendations that are fed forward or forwarded to National Marine Fisheries Service, and then ultimately approved and implemented in law, federal rule, I guess, through the Secretary of Commerce. The council process operates through 5 meetings per year. Those are publicly noticed and they're live streamed and recorded, so that they allow multiple opportunities or avenues for public participation. And those meetings occur in March, April, June, September, and November of each year. On the advisory bodies, we have, I guess I'll back up. So from the introductions, we have Butch Smith, who's one of the council representatives from Washington. And then we have Asia Mullo, and I'm sure I'm not saying her last name correctly, but she also fills a seat. So those are our 2 Washington members of the council. And then we also have agency members on the council, and that's Heather Hall, Corey Niles, and Kyle Addicks. On the advisory bodies, as we noted in the introductions, Whitney Roberts and Claudia Fries will sit on the groundfish management team. Claudia's replacing me as I'm retiring at the end of this year, so just a couple of weeks from now. And then Paul Moranti and Phil Anderson serve on the groundfish advisory panel. And then on the scientific and statistical committee, we have Teresa So from our agency that serves on that team. And we have a couple of enforcement consultants, Captain Dan Chadwick or Lieutenant Kit Rosenberger will serve alternately at meetings. So that's kind of the process, big picture of the council and all the different entities that weigh in during that process. So WDFW, we participate in the council process to represent Washington's interests and ensure that federal groundfish decisions reflect the state, tribal, and stakeholder priorities. Obviously, the tribes also have a role in representing themselves, but we do coordinate as well with them from a Washington perspective. The department then implements matching regulations in state waters to maintain consistency with federal rules and to support a seamless enforcement of fishing opportunities off our Washington coast. Our regulatory actions cover seasons, gear, bag limits, and other measures necessary to align our state management with the federal groundfish FMP and the harvest specifications that are set up each biennium. And then the agency also has responsibility for tracking the harvest in season, as well as monitoring catch dockside through our ocean sampling programs. There is a 2-year cycle for groundfish management. It kind of kicks off with assessment of a suite of stocks that are analyzed. This is completed in odd number years. Once the stock assessments have been completed, it leads to preliminary harvest specifications and management measures being brought forward for consideration in June for the council. Following that, it's a multi-council process, then moving to September, November, and onward as the council continues to refine and narrow its alternatives, and it makes preliminary and then final decisions kind of in a stepwise process for setting and determining the annual catch limits or harvest guidelines that will form the backbone of the specifications. And then second, kind of a step behind, the council adopts preliminary harvest management measures, which are your seasons, bag limits, catch limits, that sort of thing. And those are up for final adoption in June. In between, we hold WDFW meetings. So looking at the timeline in particular, you can see in June, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but again, it starts with the initial consideration of harvest specifications and management measures. September is a scoping action. Then in November is where the council is adopting those preliminary harvest specifications. And then between November and February, the groundfish management team is taking input from the states and relative to the harvest specifications and preliminary ideas for alternatives and analyzing those. And so this meeting here is where, one, we can share with all of you those initial alternatives and ideas, the harvest specifications, and then carry this back into the analysis that the GMT will be doing. It helps inform that process. So here you see we're meeting a little bit early. Typically we have our first agency or WDFW meeting in January, but because I'm retiring, it just fit for us better to have it a little bit early. From there, all of this will fall into April, where the council will adopt the final catch limits for 2027 and 28, and then their preliminary preferred alternatives for the management measures. If needed, we'll have another WDFW meeting after that before going into June, where final action takes place. And then out of June, these then go to National Marine Fisheries Service, where they're implemented in federal rule, whatever regulations and actions that are required. And at that time, that happens in January of the following calendar year. And at the same time, WDFW will take action to implement conforming rules. All right, I'll pause there if there are any questions. Otherwise, I'll move on. Okay. All right, so for the recreational regulations in Washington, we structure them by marine area. So I'm looking at this figure, but at the bottom we have Marine Area 1, which is centered on the Columbia River and also actually extends into Oregon. We'll refer to Marine Area 1 also as the Columbia River, and that's where you'll find the key ports of Ilwaco and Chinook. Moving up the coast, then Marine Area 2, which we also refer to as the South Coast, where Westport is located. Then moving up from there, we have areas 3 and 4 that together we refer to typically as the North Coast. La Push is located in Area 3 and Neah Bay is located in Area 4. And then this figure also shows our catch areas, how they wrap around through the states. And apologies to those that I guess I did note on this figure, I did clarify that it's Straits and Puget Sound. So areas 5 and 6 there wrapping into the Straits and then onward Puget Sound, which is really outside the focus of all that we have to consider here. So again, just for some background and context for this afternoon's discussion, just looking at what our current recreational bottom fish rules are. So this reflects what's in place in 2025 and barring any changes, what will be in place for 2026. So the bottom fish season opens each year the second Saturday in March and is open through the third Saturday in October. We have a daily limit that applies to all marine areas on the coast. So again, we're not referring to Puget Sound or Straits. That is a 9-fish bottom fish total or in the aggregate, with a 7-fish rockfish limit within that, a 5-fish canary rockfish sub-bag limit, a 1 cabezon plus an additional 5 flatfish. And then we don't include surf perch in this bottom fish limit, and that's a 12 and 15, whether it's surf perch or shiner perch. Notably, copper, quillback, and vermilion rockfish are prohibited for retention in May, June, and July, and this is the second biennial cycle that we've had that in place, and we continue to have no retention of yelloweye. On the North Coast, we have a 20-fathom depth restriction. This used to be more broad in time, but now it's closes from July 1 to July 31. Waters deeper than 20 fathoms, except for lingcod, sablefish, Pacific cod, cacho, silver gray, canary, widow, and yellowtail are allowed on halibut days. And then yellowtail and widow rockfish are allowed seaward of 20 fathoms in July. On the south coast, we currently have a 30-fathom line. We're deeper than that. It's closed to lingcod in May. So the 1st through the 31st, except on halibut days. There's also a deep water lingcod closure that approximates to the 50-fathom line, where it's closed, except it's open to on days open to halibut, and also from June 1 through June 15, and then the month of September. And then I'll just note that the acronym there, the YRCAs, are yellow eye rockfish conservation areas. There were 2 areas that were opened in a prior biennium, and just flagging that as we talk about catch history, particularly for canary, having that in the background to know that they used to be closed but are now open can be helpful, just for context. And then the Columbia River or Marine Area 1, lingcod allowed on board with halibut north of the Oregon-Washington border. Deepwater lingcod is also closed except for that June 1 through June 15 and the month of September. And then there's a list of bottom fish that I'm not going to read that can be kept on halibut days. And just again, flagging that our Columbia River regulations are coordinated with Oregon, since that marine area spans the 2 states on the North Coast, or the North Coast of Oregon, South Coast of Washington. So then here looking at the stocks that impact Washington recreational fisheries in terms of what we look at for close tracking to harvest levels, and primarily where we're focused most of our management attention. That includes black rockfish, which are, I guess, the backbone of the coastal recreational fishery. Canary rockfish, well rebuilt, are still a constraining species, And this is due to the management structure in place for this stock. And we'll be touching on that more here in a few slides. Yellow eye rockfish have been a constraint since 2002 when they were declared overfished, and management to reduce encounters while preserving fishing opportunity has been a central focus of the council and WDFW over those intervening years. There is good news here. That very conservative management approach to yellow eye has been successful, and a federal rebuilt declaration is pending. Again, we can get more into the details on that. But yeah, that's something to highlight. Vermilion rockfish matter because we encounter them at low levels. And while the stock assessment, which is data limited, suggests a low population, it is one we need to track closely. And similarly, copper and quillback populations are presumed or appear to be relatively small, and so they have correspondingly low harvest guidelines. And so we also want to track our catch of those stocks. And then not listed here is cabezon, and that's one we also kind of closely track. So here, kind of give you some updated catch information. I want to flag that all the 2025 catch estimates are preliminary, as are the annual harvest limits that are proposed for 2027 and 2028. We're working with preliminary estimates for catch, as well as preliminary alternative choices for the harvest limits at this point. So these numbers are could likely change. So just want to emphasize that. And then through the whole presentation, catch is in metric tons and includes total mortality. So it's what fishermen have retained and also what have been discarded. So it may not say, but all of these values represent catch that's retained and released. So kind of looking at this table, working left to right, table presents catch under the blue heading for the 5-year period 2021 through 2025. And then the annual limits or harvest guidelines, we use those terms synonymously, for 3 biennial periods are shown in green. So we have 2023, 2024, 2025, 26, the current biennium we're in, and then the upcoming 2027, 2028 biennium. And just flag that these harvest limits are that we refer to as guidelines. We use them as a framework to plan our seasons, but they don't function as quotas, and they're not hard caps. Kind of highlighting across the species. I'm not going to read all of the details on the catch. This table will get posted, and again, because 2025 values are preliminary, I think the final data will be available in January or February, so it may be more useful to grab the numbers then. So yeah, black rockfish remains the largest component of the coastal rockfish catch. Touching briefly on canary, yellow eye vermilion, we're going to do a deeper dive on those in subsequent slides. But canary rockfish, we see a decline from nearly 40 metric tons in 2021 to about 22 metric tons in 2023, and a further decline down to 20.5 in 2025. Yellow eye rockfish catches remain very small across the 5-year period. And then vermilion rockfish, we see the declining trend in catch. This is expected and consistent with our prohibition on retention beginning in 23 in May, June, and July. Moving down to the nearshore rockfish complex, blue deacon, we do see catches trending up somewhat over this 5-year period, whereas China rockfish catches appear to be steady. And then copper and quillback similarly show decline with vermilion, which again is understandable as that prohibition on their retention kind of kicks in, and as anglers become very familiar with that requirement. For the Cabezon kelp greenling complex, Cabezon is largely steady catches over the 5-year period, whereas we see a modest trend of increasing catches for kelp greenling. And then for the set of species down below, just flagging lingcod, it's variable across years. And then just I'll note anecdotally, I'm hearing that lingcod size in the fishery is declining. So we can look at biological data to kind of explore that further, but I think I'd be interested as we're discussing sort of the seasons going forward or just through this process, if that's also something those of you that fish and participate in the fishery are seeing. So just kind of flagging that as something for, getting some more input or your perspective on lingcod. I'll just flag here too that across the harvest limits for 2025, we're below all of them except for canary rockfish, which we'll discuss here in a bit. So just otherwise, we are seeing our catches generally fall either just under our harvest limits or well under. So kind of doing a little bit deeper dive. And again, I guess maybe I'll pause here. I don't see hands. If there's any questions.
Lorna, while you're paused, I've been watching the chat.
Okay.
Like Thomas, who wasn't able to speak in the introduction, seems joined, but also noticing Steve Westrick seems to be bouncing in and out, and I don't know if folks are in touch with Steve, but if he's having problems with Teams,
okay,
we could try to help him.
I've got him here on my phone listening. He's watching the presentation on his computer, and I've got him on the phone listening through my computer.
Oh,
okay.
Thanks, Phil.
Great. Super use of collaborative technology. Love that. Yeah, and again, this will be posted to the website, and I can share slides with you all too. So for those of you that have been bounced on and off, yeah, we'll try and get that covered. And then I guess, Thomas, I did see that you had been cut off, so we did miss you in the round of introductions, but if you just want to speak to like who you are and like if you represent someone, or if you're at large, we can pause here and let you do that.
Yeah, I'm Thomas LeClaire. I'm just watching to learn more, representing myself.
Okay, super. Glad to have you here. Okay, so yeah, moving into one of our focal species. So yellow eye rockfish, just some background, were declared overfished in 2002. That designation reflected a dramatic population decline at a historical level. At that time, the assessment estimated that the population had dropped to about 7 to 13% of the pre-fishing biomass in certain areas. So pretty depleted. Because yellow eye rockfish, they're very long-lived, slow-growing, and late-maturing fish. They can live up to 150 years. They're particularly vulnerable to overfishing, and at that time, recovery was expected to be slow. And so as a result of the overfish status and just, that biological characteristics of the fish and the anticipated slow recovery, management measures were implemented in 2002 and 2003. Targeted fishing was banned, and only incidental bycatch, and even that had strict limits, was allowed. However, this year, the results of an update assessment indicate that yellow-eye rockfish biomass has reached a level consistent with the rebuilding goals, which is a major milestone. I think we're maybe subdued about that generally, but I think it is something to reflect on and appreciate just the years of strict conservative management is showing fruit. So yeah, after more than 2 decades. And then this improvement is seen in the preliminary Washington State harvest guidelines. So looking at this slide, at the status, rebuilt status is I'm not seeing the chat show the council. Oh, sorry. Okay. Just noting the chat that's popped up on my screen. So yes, thank you, Phil. I will pause here and say that yes, we have Chris German from the Coast Guard, which also serves on the council. With yellow-eye, the rebuilt declaration is pending. Our current rules, retention is prohibited across all fisheries, recreational fisheries as well. Our preliminary Washington State harvest guidelines for the recreational fishery are 21.8 metric tons in 2027 and 21.9 metric tons in 2028. And for comparison, the 2025 and 26 harvest guidelines are rounded about 8 metric tons, and our recent 5-year catch has been on average roughly 2.9 metric tons. So just to provide that context. Yes, Phil?
I find it a little ironic that our yellow-eye rockfish harvest guideline is going to be higher than our canary harvest guideline. Just noting that.
Yeah, good catch. Yeah, it is interesting. And then just to kind of walk you through the figure there, it shows catch in the boxes for each year beginning with 2018. Then each of the columns are a month, and then each of the colors within the bar are marine area. So you can see fairly readily that the north coast of the green and yellow sections of those columns are the north coast where we see most of the yellow-eye caught. And then just the variability of catch across years. But I will note the scale, it's ranging from 0 to 2 metric tons. So, Bill, do you still, is that a legacy hand or new question or comment?
Legacy.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, just to kind of give folks what we've seen with yellow-eye rockfish catch. On to canary. There's been lots of thoughts and conversations around canary. Its status is not overfished. Our current Washington regulations have a 5-fish sublimit. That was new this year. Moving into 2027 and 2028, the state harvest guidelines are 18.7 metric tons and 19.3 metric tons. And that compares to roughly 17 metric tons for the current biennium. And that also compares to our 2025 catch of 20.5 metric tons. And again, here you see the recent catch since 28 in each of the boxes. Again, the columns are organized by month with the catch areas and the different colors. And here we see the almost the opposite with yellow-eye, where the dark blue and the medium blue are area 1 and 2, where we see most of the canary rockfish catch. really centered off of area 2, and that also aligns with those two areas that I mentioned initially that had been closed, those two YRCAs. Those were opened, I think, beginning in 2021 or 2. I'll draw a blank on that here, but it was when those areas were opened that coincided with us relaxing bag limits that we saw that big jump in catch in 2021. So recall, Canary were declared rebuilt in 2015, and Washington took a very precautionary approach. Yeah, thanks, Whitney. So it's 2021, 22 that those YRCAs were opened. And that was one of the later actions we took. So initially, Washington out of the gate was very cautious about allowing Canary after so many years of non-retention and not being sure what it would look like as we opened up. So in 2017, which is 1 year before the panel here catch that's shown, we had a 1 fish bag limit in marine area 1 and 2 only. And then in subsequent years, we went to 2 and then coast-wide and then relaxed some of the depth restrictions. And so you see progressively more catch up until 2025, following an update assessment in 23 for Canary, which showed status of the stock, while still rebuilt, was lower than what we'd previously understood. And so that led to a fairly significant reduction in the catch limits coast-wide for this stock across all sectors. And particularly for us, we saw that big decline to the 17 metric ton harvest guideline. I think Washington or WDFW, I guess, like as the state, we've been raising concerns over the Canary allocations, which inform our harvest guidelines, going back to the first 2-year allocations in 2017 and 2018, and then raised some of the concerns again in 2022, 2024, and again more recently here in 2025. I think it's helpful to note that those allocations that were set were done and have been done on an ad hoc basis, and were based on not having a lot of information about the fishery. We've had no retention, and so very limited understanding of what the fishery would look like as we allowed catch, and even what the fishery would need. So it's made it difficult, and it's constraining us. Those initial sort of ideas about what the fishery might need have evolved, but maybe our approach to the management hasn't evolved as quickly. So that's something that Washington has brought forward for the council consideration, and including ideas of how to approach the issue. Obviously, we can see Washington's capacity or need for Canary, even with the 5 fish bag limit, which we weren't surprised that we exceeded the 17.3 harvest guideline for this year, given the lack of a long time period of data to work with. It's difficult to project what our catches will be for an upcoming cycle. We also are looking at these as their guidelines that help us be accountable in the process to what our share is relative to our need and relative to what's available. But it isn't a hard cap, and we do coordinate with Oregon and California informally to ensure that if we're exceeding our harvest guideline, that we're not putting anyone else at risk, or certainly the stock is not at risk. There's a significant amount of buffer that is above all of these harvest guidelines. So when I describe us exceeding a harvest guideline. This isn't like a quota that's biologically based. This is more about how we're allocating this resource and trying best to share that across all the sectors. I don't know. I think, Corey, if you want to speak to some of the WDFW proposal, I think really maybe to set the stage is we're trying to encourage thinking that backs us away from considering these harvest guidelines as hard caps that if we are reaching them or exceed them, we have to close a fishery. And something that recognizes, as conservative as the council is, we're actually leaving canary that could be caught on the table each year. So there's, I guess, a disconnect between how we're managing canary and what opportunity we could have if we were looking at this from a different perspective, where there's currently the assumption that everyone is going to catch their harvest guideline or their allotment in any given year, which we don't see. We see highly variable catch in some of the commercial fishery sectors. But in no case are we seeing where everyone every year is catching 100% of what they might. So we're operating in terms of this idea that those are certainties when they're not. So I'll pause here. Larry, you had a question, and then I think too, Corey, if you want to weigh in. I know you've given this a lot of thought.
Yeah, I'm also interested in hearing Corey's creative thinking that we heard a little bit about before at our delegation call the last meeting. But this is a coast-wide issue, and I think it's probably challenging for a lot of us to understand how the regulatory process doesn't give us more flexibility when when we're from a coast-wide all fisheries standpoint, we're significantly below our total allowable catch, and any exceeding state catch from recreational that would put us in a conservation challenge. So, but I'm also, I think we all saw that Oregon and California took in-season action last year to maintain their commitment to stay within their harvest guidelines. So I'm just wondering, and maybe this is after Corey gives us maybe some thoughts on conversations that have happened with Oregon or California relative to their fisheries, and collectively how we're talking about finding some sort of solution to move forward here for all of our fisheries. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. I think I'll add one thing for folks to consider is some of the actions I would think California and Oregon took is they have nearshore commercial fisheries, whereas Washington doesn't. We don't have any comparable nearshore commercial fisheries. So I think some of their actions are taken to address like kind of balancing between their recreational and commercial sectors in state waters. And then with that, Corey, jump in. And you've had, for folks that don't know, Corey's really led some great thinking on how to be more flexible in how we approach canary management.
Yeah, no, thanks, Laura. It's kind of funny, and I think Heather said this on the floor, but it's people are calling it creative and new, but this is actually the way that we were trying to think back 10 15 years ago, and it's kind of how and when Phil was leading us at WDFW and Michelle and Brian Covero, it's just kind of going back to that, trying to explain this the way that fisheries really work versus how we account for the catches ahead of time. And it's been a challenge, but I think, and what happened was, the canary quotas went up so high for a while, and it became less of an issue. Yellow eye too, it became less pressing. We were down to 44 metric tons in like 2007 for canary, which I forget what that meant for the recreational fishery, but again, it was very, like you were saying, constraining to our fishery. But the thing about canary, it's constraining to every fishery, including our trawl fisheries and our, the shoreside whiting fishery, what's important to our state and Westport. I think the simplest way to explain it is that, and for reasons that could take a while to explain, but we have an IFQ fishery that covers the trawl fisheries mainly, and bottom trawl and shoreside whiting, and they get the bulk of the allocation of the ACL for canary. Yet we've seen over how many years? I don't think they've ever taken more than 60% of their allocation. When it went the last assessment, it cut the ACL by more than half. So everyone is looking at a lot less than they had before. But we're seeing again, it's December 10th here, and if you look at the NIMS website for canary rockfish, there's the IFQ fishery still has 168 metric tons unfished, and they're unlikely to take much, if any, of that the remainder of the year, just given their business models and plans. And it has to do with the annual nature of their quota that we give them, and it expires at the end of the year. So it's kind of complicated, but I think with confidence we can say, until conditions change in that part of the fishery, we're going to be looking at leaving 100 metric tons or so unfished each year, and that's kind of the assumption we're asking everyone to think hard about, at least. And we could be planning for that to happen in a smarter way. And just the approach that we're suggesting people take a look at, and the council did support us looking at it as a starting point. I didn't pick up on the fact that the yellow eye harvest guideline is bigger than the canary one now. Yet what we started off by saying, let's look at what would happen if you increased all the recreational harvest guidelines by 25%. So we will be looking at that status quo amount Lorna has there, but we're also looking at something 25% higher. And at the same time, the harvest guidelines aren't meant to be treated as hard caps, but we kind of have treated them as. So it's also to let's back off of that concept and realize that catch varies. Some years we might be over, some years under, and when you throw every sector into that, we can take a different perspective, and but think hard and carefully about what the likelihood is that everyone's catch overall reaches the annual catch limit or not. So that's a lot explained. It isn't. I appreciate hearing the creativity of it. It's really nice. It's kind of going back to the way we used to try to do it, and was hard to explain all the way up through the lawyers, etc. It is really just trying to take a more realistic view of what's going to be caught versus what actually gets put on paper. And this happens at other places like the Joint Management Committee for the Whiting Treaty. I'll stop there. But I think the bottom line for us is we're going to start off looking at our status quo, something 25% higher, and then asking everyone to look at what that means for our fishery, but then every other fishery, and how close we think we would be to the ACLs or not in the period we're planning for, which is 2027, 2028. I also should say, really appreciate the support of our GAP folks in getting it through and helping people understand the concept. And all right, I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Just any questions folks have? I know it's a lot to digest if you're not familiar with the council management. But essentially, we are leaving fish that could be harvested, here in this case, canary rockfish, substantial amount. As Corey said, 168 metric tons are left for 2025. And so that's where I say, putting in perspective, if we're over a couple of tons in the Washington recreational fishery, there is no risk biologically. It's just the approach that we have has had us in really tight boxes, and that was reasonable given the constraints that we've had for canary for so many years. But just, yeah, trying to grow beyond that mindset that we've kind of gotten collectively, council family, the states, as far as how we're looking at these harvest guidelines. I will move on then to vermilion rockfish. This is one again where we.
Phil's got his hand up, Lauren.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Phil. Are you back on canary?
Yeah, is that okay?
Okay.
Well, I think Larry Phillips asked the question about, it's a coast, or made the point it's a coast-wide issue. When you look down in Oregon and California, Oregon was down to a one fish canary limit this year. I think overall they had a 3 or 4 fish rockfish limit. So I mean they were in trouble in more species than just canary. And they were taking, in-season management actions as they were getting close to or projecting to exceed their harvest guideline. So what's with Washington? Because we, as you said, Lorna, we expected to be over the 17, or we weren't going to be surprised if we were over the 17, even with the implementation of a 5 fish limit. And as you correctly pointed out, when you make these sub limits of rockfish within a larger bag limit, it's difficult to project exactly what the outcome is going to be. But I think Lorna's projections consistently suggested that with a 5 fish limit, we would catch fewer canary rockfish in our recreational fishery, but we did anticipate going over the 17 tons. And our point all along, and this isn't the first biennium that this has been, with the change in the status of the stock, really lowering the ACL by half. And as Corey pointed out, we knew that the coastwide catch with all the sectors included, we were going to be well below the ACL at the annual catch, coastwide annual catch limit. And if we went over by 3 or 4 or 5 metric tons or 6 or 7, that there was going to be no conservation issue whatsoever. And we weren't going to be taking fish away from someone else. What we were going to be catching is taking unused fish out of what was in another sector, as the illustration that Corey made. So my only point here is that we knew that there was a good chance we were going to be over the 17. We, the state, made it clear to the council that we were not going to take unnecessary, meaningless in-season actions to keep our catch at 17. If we thought we were going to be at 21 and there were all these fish left over in other sectors, they shouldn't be looking to us to make an in-season change and just some sort of drastic change in terms of lowering the sublimit. So my point is we've been upfront about this. We've been very cognizant about the ad hoc nature of these allocations. There has, and the reason that canary is different than, say, yellowtail, where there is a multi-year cross biennial cycle allocations, is that canary were under the terms of a rebuilding schedule for since 1997 or something like that. And so once it was rebuilt, the council judged that we needed to let the fishery run for a little bit to take a look and see what sectors we're using before they attempted to determine any long-term allocation regime. And the fact of the matter is, I think this is the third biennial cycle where we've got this allocation. It is ad hoc in nature in that it is it's a one cycle allocation, largely driven by observed catches from prior years, or proportional to observed catches from prior years, and so it's really is ad hoc in nature, and there hasn't been any consideration of economic impacts or social impacts or impacts to ports or impacts to commercial or recreational fisheries in a meaningful long-term way. So, okay, thanks for letting me say all that. On to the next topic.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Phil. You bring a great perspective across years and thinking that went behind it. So yeah, I think to emphasize, going over isn't a conservation issue, and it wasn't something that we did just cavalierly. It was in coordination and discussion at the council level, and with a nod to that from California and Oregon. Corey?
Yeah, no, hey, and thanks, Phil, but I just would echo what you said. But one thing I just think you said, well, I can't remember, it was on the council floor or one of our side meetings, but the 2015 assessment and then the result we saw in 2023 were so different, that you asked at one point, like, if we had known, if what we had was the 2023 assessment, why would we be starting in the place that we were? And I thought that was just the right way to ask it. Of there wasn't too much rhyme or reason of where we were in 2023, other than the ACL dropped by more than 50%, and we were working our way up from the 2015 version of the world. So I really thought that was the right way to think about it. And on that, I don't know, Lorna, if I lost track of our slides, but I think we have lessons learned to start thinking about and how we approach yellow eye. But I don't want to jump the gun on that, Lorna.
Yeah, that's coming up. So thanks, Corey. So let's see, I'll move on. I think that's just good, helpful context for Canary, because it does inform some of our thinking. Phil, I think maybe you need to mute. Might be someone else, but anyways. Vermilion, not overfished, currently prohibited retention in May, June, and July. The preliminary Washington State harvest guidelines for 27 and 28, it's kind of consistent. It's the 0.7 metric tons. So it's similar to this current biennium. And our catch for 2025 is just under that at 0.6. Again, these are preliminary estimates of catch, and see the box set of figures there. It's very clear that vermilion are primarily caught in marine area 4, so up out of Nia Bay. And again, as it's a stock we don't have a lot of data for. As best we know, with the information we do have, it's a smaller stock. Our catches are small, but we just need to track that closely. And the reason why we don't prohibit, I think maybe to add this for folks that aren't familiar, we are allowing vermilion and copper and quillback to be retained in March and April and September, and that's so that we can collect much needed biological data, which helps us in the stock assessments where we are evaluating the population. So we want to avoid having long periods where we don't retain a particular species, because then we just further the challenge of the lack of information. Okay, so getting into more of the meat of what we're here for, and that's to consider alternatives for 2027 and 2028. So I'll just kind of do a overview, and then we can dive into each one. So we have what we're kind of tagging as new alternatives or ideas to evaluate for consideration. And the first is removing the 30 fathom lingcod depth restriction in May. And that's a South Coast or Marine Area 2 idea. The second is closing the deep water opportunity for lingcod the latter half of September. And then looking, and I've got limited yellow eye rockfish retention just out of the thought that we're not going to probably open it wide open, but that it would take a stepwise approach. But the analysis will likely be very broad. We want to set the bounds for the council and policy decision makers very broadly, because in this process, if we cut it off too short, decisions can't move beyond that bound. And so we're probably going to be looking at analyzing a wide range of opportunities with yellow eye, recognizing the actual choices will be somewhat less than wide open opportunity. And then we kind of categorize other measures, and that's just evaluating the management measure performance for canary, and then the 3 other species where we prohibit retention, and that's copper, quillback, and vermilion. I'll say in this process, if say Washington had really blown past our recreational harvest guideline, we would be looking at that. This is a time where we can reevaluate in between our seasons from one year to the next. So it's not out of bounds, but I'll say that's not on the table for canary this year, but it's something we do look at. And then there's space here still to consider other bag limit or season changes. We don't have any in particular in mind, but it is at this point where those could be brought forward. So kind of jumping into the specifics, this first one of removing the 30 fathom lingcod depth restriction in May, the current rule closes those waters deeper, except on halibut days. And so this is focused on lingcod retention. And it took me a little bit to wrap my head around this, but basically without lingcod being allowed, effort just isn't drawn out into those deeper waters. And so it affords protection to yellow eye. And in the past, it was also protecting canary rockfish, which is not as concerned. And going forward with the rebuilt status pending for yellow eye and where we're at with canary rockfish, this action is kind of like, I think maybe the last step of many years where this 30 fathom line was in place. And back when it first was implemented, it prohibited bottomfish retention deeper than 30 fathoms. So we brought the fishery in near shore. And then progressively that's been relaxed over intervening years. And so this may be just that last pulling up the Band-Aid kind of idea. In evaluating removal of this depth restriction, we'll want to consider yellow eye and canary rockfish total mortality, noting that because we've had more days open to halibut in May, particularly since 2020, 2021, sort of that post-pandemic time period, we've seen quite a dramatic change in the halibut fishery, which used to be really derby fishery coast-wide and rarely lasted past May, where now if you're a halibut fisherman, you know we have relatively long seasons extending into June on the coast and then even in August and September. So when we're looking at removing this 30 fathom line, it's May 1 through May 31st minus about 8 days. So it's not even a full month. it would expand lingcod opportunity. And then just also another consideration in looking at it is helping to reduce some regulatory complexity. So I'll pause if there's any questions. Yeah, go ahead, Rhett.
Yeah, the one thing that I'm looking forward to if this goes through is being able to target lingcod on those days and be able to avoid having to go for black rockfish. You know, being forced into the into that northern nearshore area to fish for lingcod. Forced me to fish for black rockfish when I could have been out doing yellowtails.
Phil?
I think the other point I would like to make is we are not proposing removing the 50 fathom line. So this isn't remove the 30 fathom line and just everybody go crazy. I didn't mean it really that way, but so the 50 fathom line would be retained, except obviously on halibut days and during any time period that had a deep water lingcod retention, which right now is the first 2 weeks of June and then the month of May, or excuse me, the month of September. So we do not want to just relax everything relative and relative to the savings that have accrued for yellow eye and canary. So
Thanks, Phil. And I'll swear, I know you probably aren't able to advance through these slides, but you seem to know exactly what's coming up next. So I'd suggest you've been into this process a while. So yeah, the second idea is for evaluation is to look at Marine Area 1 and 2 and actually closing the deep water opportunity for lingcod in the latter half of September. So it would maintain under this proposal the deep water lingcod line, which it approximates the 50 fathom curve, but it's really defined here on this map. You can see there's a line that runs from the north to south, and it is between those two lat longs that are shown there on the map. So again, this closes lingcod retention except on halibut days, any time of the year, and also it's allowed June 1 through 15 and then the month of September. Again, as Phil mentioned, this was a depth-based tool to reduce yellow eye and canary rockfish encounters. And so looking at this particular alternative, it is closing a later season. While I think thinking of this in tandem with the relaxation or the additional opportunity that will be afforded and potential impacts on yellow-eyed canary with the additional opportunity in May by removing the 30 fathom depth restriction. So with that, yeah, Larry.
Larry has his hand up.
Thanks, Whitney.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I'm trying to think about how much do we have any effort in deep water in September outside of halibut days? It doesn't seem like it.
We used to, but not as much. This last year, not much.
I wouldn't think. I hate to close it to protect a little bit, but or maybe you don't give up much. I don't know. Different ways to think about it.
Yeah, Larry. Phil, and thanks for it.
Well, I think it's, the amount of effort that we've seen in the last 2 weeks of September has diminished from when we first introduced this deep water opportunity concept after canary were rebuilt and we kind of had yellow eye figured out. Particularly when one in particular, but several of the yellow eye conservation areas that were opened contained a lot of really good fishing for lingcod and canary in particular. So there were boats in Westport that were targeting that deepwater ling opportunity during September, but I think that has slowly changed a bit over time as some of the fishing success in those that deepwater time frame has moderated with time. Yeah, I agree that there's not a lot, but there still is some. And if this also could help us with our canary harvest guideline business by which I think, there's a lot of targeting of canary on those deepwater opportunity days for lingcod. So this would help with a couple of different things, I think. Not cause a lot of disruption to recreational fishing or to the charter business, but at the same time could provide us some additional savings for canary. So that was the logic behind suggesting examining this particular change.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. I think, that's a good question. And I think some of the analysis will help flesh that out, like what is saved by closing that time period relative to what maybe the increased impacts might be relaxing opportunity in May. Right, Butch, go ahead.
I just like to point out, listening to this over the years when Phil was director, and you, Lauren, and the team you guys have, and Corey and Heather, the importance of trying to keep the bag limit reasonable, when people are fishing has been somewhat important, I feel. And that's it. That's why Oregon's kind of in trouble. They have some ports that want to stay open all year round, and some years when the weather's good, they have a lot of customers there along 101. And so I think it's important that we maintain a reasonable bag limit, because right now that 3 fish or whatever it's down to is causing fishers to squeal quite a bit down in Oregon. There's quite a bit of testimony and stuff written about it. And so I just like to point out that I think you guys have done an amazing job managing this resource to allow, and during some pretty difficult times, to allow us to maximize the amount of fish we take in coordination when the people, not just customers, when small boaters and everybody can go fishing. We the last 4 or 5 years, September has been a mess out in the ocean, and that's probably a main reason why some of that has self managed itself due to some pretty horrific ocean conditions the second half of September, even into the second week of September. So anyway, just want to point that out. That's our aggressive management style and get ahead of the issues, and it seems to be working pretty well. And comparing us with Oregon's kind of apples and oranges, because they do have an all year round fisheries is the main reason they have to go down to such a small bag limit. So anyway, just a fun fact for you. Thanks for letting me speak.
Yeah, thanks, Butch. Happy to have you share that information. I think that's good insight. It's something that I think is helpful to keep in mind, comparing any of the fisheries and looking at Washington, Oregon, and California recreational fisheries. It is apples and oranges and peaches and grapes up and down the coast. And I would probably say that where we're at reflects sort of the whole collective effort of everyone, with the input from industry and management through the council process and through the stakeholder process. It's invaluable getting your input. So that is that. And I will say, I don't have it here on the slide, but it is captured in the text of the proposal that we'd be looking at some alignment of these deep water or these lines between area 1 and 2. There's some wonkiness. I don't want to go into the weeds of it, but just know that that isn't that hasn't been dropped. I just didn't emphasize that, and that would help, I think, get at some regulatory complexity, simplifying it. Larry?
Yeah, thanks, Lorna. And again, like others have said, I appreciate, the creativity in us trying to maximize all the opportunity here. But one thing that would be really helpful, I think, to just inform the conversation is to, and I don't want to create more work for you guys, I know you're busy, but to give us if we had an estimate of what the effort, number of angler days, amount of catch were for these seasons we're talking about potentially shifting or closing, I think that would help us. It would certainly help me better understand kind of what, the pros and cons are, just as part of this conversation.
Yeah,
I'm guessing you've thought about that, but I don't want to create more work because I know you guys are busy, but it would certainly be helpful.
Yeah, no, Larry, you're right on the mark. That is actually the work. I'm looking to Claudia. So we brought her on. She's got some fantastic analytical skills and has worked with the Gulf Council. So West Coast will be new to her, but yeah, this is really a very preliminary, like kicking off this process. We haven't done the analysis yet. So that's something also Whitney will be very involved in. The GMT has an overwinter meeting in February. So they'll be crunching all this data. I think Claudia's already looking at it. So yeah, at the second WDFW meeting, that's where I think we'd expect to say, yeah, here's what each of these proposals looks like in terms of what we think it might increase catch or decrease catch, how, what effort has looked like. This was just sort of this high level overview of catches without effort yet. So yeah, you're on the mark. And that's what we'll be bringing back in some subsequent meetings. I say it'll be the rest of the WDFW team that's going to be doing an awesome job on that. Corey?
Yeah, I think I'll just call it, well, as you and Phil called it, I mean, it's also, I'm just not telling anyone anything they don't know, but it's pretty hard to do this. The one thing that Rhett said that caught my ear was, if this one of the earlier change happens, then yellowtail might go, become more of the sub bag limit. And so I think other than we can show effort and try quantifying it, but it's also going to take some input from you all on the limits of what we can quantify and talk about scenarios of what might happen qualitatively. And we're going to get to the yellow eye question, but it's hard to do with any kind of certainty is the point I'm trying to emphasize here.
Yeah, I think that's true. The numbers will only take us so far, but we will have more of that type of information available to the extent that we can. So then the next is, again, just evaluating yellow eye retention. Obviously, it's been prohibited for a couple of decades now. The idea for evaluating opportunity, just pending this rebuilt declaration. And again, as I had mentioned, we want to look at the full range of options, areas and bag limits, and or combinations, kind of provide a menu of choices. I've listed some considerations here. So again, thinking about yellow eye being newly rebuilt and being precautionary, similar to how we were with canary. We haven't fished on yellow eye in a long time, so we don't know exactly what, how the fishery will behave. I've got here need for biological data from recreational caught fish. This is a data gap we have because of the prohibition on retention. It's not a reason to or not to retain yellow eye. I have that listed there in terms of if we're not going to allow all the areas within Washington to retain yellow eye, are there some areas where our ability to collect biological data is stronger than other areas? I think that's a key piece to consider. Angler interest in yellow eye rockfish. I've heard both. We're going to be terrified to catch yellow eye, or that's an iconic, delicious big fish, and I'm going to go target it if there's a one fish bag limit even. So again, things as we think about the alternatives, so it's not meant to be a yes or no to move forward, but just and how we are thinking about just how to structure whatever seasons or bag limits might be considered. Yeah, then the full range of bag limits from 0 to none, which would be a 7 rockfish. Don't want to alarm folks. It's just to allow us to set the bounds. If we just did a 1 fish bag limit analysis, then that's all the council could consider in 2027 and 2028. So we want broader sideboards. Areas, all or none, what that looks like. And then as we are opening up maybe areas by depth to yellow eye rockfish, what does that mean for some of the co-occurring rockfish species like canary? And then also kind of continuing on this vein of how we look at canary rockfish and the harvest guidelines, and how those are constraining us, and we're trying to think a little bit more in terms of probability of attaining, or every sector attaining their harvest guideline or catch limit versus the, treating it as a certainty. I think that issue is going to play into how we think about yellow eye. And also then just here pose this as a question. Maybe this would, at this point, helpful to hear from you all, like how we want to look at and use our canary and yellow eye allocations. And that can then kind of be this iterative as we analyze information, and then in framing that around some of the input from stakeholders as to preferences or ideas for how to, I guess, achieve or approach opportunity for both, since they're quite tied. Brett?
Yeah, we've got a pretty good thing going overall in this state, and I'd hate to see us jeopardize it on a stock that is being declared rebuilt. So I agree 100% on a precautious approach. Maybe a 1 fish bag fringe seasons inside of 50 fathoms, which would move it very much into almost an incidental and less of a targeted take, would work for area 2. I don't know how the other guys feel about that, but that's my opinion, at least for area 2.
Okay. So 1 fish inside 50 fathoms. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
I had to turn my mic back on. And possibly even certain months.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Right. Next, Larry. Yeah, thanks, Brett.
Yeah, thanks. I concur with Red. I think, it's not that long ago, we just lived through this challenge, and I don't want to sound like Mr. Obvious here, but the fact that we rebuilt yellow eye rockfish, 60 years faster than, or how many ever years faster than we thought we were going to. While I'd love to celebrate that, it just means that we we probably started in the wrong spot, or there was significant uncertainty with the stock assessment where we were. So I support whatever approach that our managers come up with that can give us some certainty that we won't have challenges, at least from the recreational directed harvest standpoint. But from my lens, it's more important that we have consistency in our halibut fisheries and our other fisheries, deep water rock lingcod and other fisheries, so that we don't get ourselves in a situation where we have to take in-season action. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry. With that, I'll say if you want consistency for managers in this arena, I'm kind of I'm retiring because I don't know, but I get your point. Yeah, I think that will be an important consideration of not putting us where we jeopardize the stability and current package of fishing opportunities we have. So agree there. Let's see. Head next, Rhett again.
It's old.
Old. Okay, then Steve Westrick.
Hi, I finally figured out how to get my microphone working, but about the LOI, thank you. I'm obviously really happy about the possible opportunity to catch one, and I don't disagree with the one fish limit thing, but I think we better, before we make any really bold recommendations, let everybody talk about it, in their groups. I know, like, I don't really disagree with Rhett, but if you put yellow eye into a certain area, people were still going to target them. I would say, even if it's a one fish limit, which is if it's open, people are probably going to do it, and that could cause a little bit more of a local depletion, or whatever the word might be, for inside of 50 fathoms, or if it's open in all the areas, it might spread the catch out more and not have that problem so much. But and I think it depends on your the number, obviously, the TAC or whatever the number might be, before you can make any real bold recommendations. But I think starting off conservatively is a good approach, and even if it's a one per one limit in the bag would be makes sense also. So yeah, I totally appreciate the discussion about the yellow eye, and probably shouldn't say this, I was thinking about retiring, but man, if we could keep a yellow eye, that would be fantastic.
I'm going to go out on a high note.
Go out on a high note. Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no, thanks, Steve. I think, your insight is very helpful. And let's see. So I'm going to go to Butch. I think that's the next.
And
Yeah,
Dave
Lorna
says he can't raise his hand. Oops, sorry, Whitney. Cut you off.
Oh, it's okay. I was going to say that too.
So, yeah,
Oh,
thank
sorry.
you, and appreciate what everybody said. Certainly, I think that too, we've got to be aware that this particular fish, we've got to watch it go globally too, how it's managed, since we all were put in the same boat together when we got into trouble. We gotta make sure that the other states don't go crazy, and it's just I know you guys know your job, but it's just a fear of doing something too fast that turns into a big old yellow eye rodeo that I want to stay away from, and not put us back in jail again if we can possibly help it. So whatever options are thought of, I think that we have to think on this one, more West Coast, to make sure others aren't Katie bar the door type management, and certainly figure out in our own state where it wouldn't be a big, yellow eye rodeo and stay, if we're going to take some in a bag limit, whatever that some is, make sure it doesn't put us back where we don't want to be. Because that did spill. I don't know if people remember, but that did spill over to Nia Bay salmon one year. So it does, and it's affected, every fisheries on the West Coast in some way. So anyway, thank you, Lorna.
Thanks, Butch. Whitney, I'm seeing it correctly, then Phil is up next.
Yes, but Dave Johnson.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead, Dave, if that's okay, Phil? He's at a disadvantage being on the phone.
Oh, I would love to have Dave go first.
Okay, I'll go first.
Yep, go ahead, Dave.
Hey, thanks, guys. We talked about it up on the North Coast a little bit when we were talking about this possibility last year. And if it was to open, we would only like to open it up during halibut days in May, and that is it. So otherwise, guys are going to go out and target them and get way too many. So we would just like to have a short opportunity for a one fish bag limit on halibut days in May.
Yeah, that's great.
That way you can get some stats.
Dave, because that's kind of appreciate that. That's a kind of a specific pairing. And so knowing to look at, like, at least to create an analysis that gets at that is good.
Good. All right, thanks. I'm going back to mute. Go, Uncle Phil.
Well, our association hasn't really talked about this much yet, so but we will. Personally, I'm in the Butch camp. We need to be really careful, in my view, because it isn't just about what we do, it's about what they do to the south of us. Because if it goes south, if it goes bad, if catches go up and we get into trouble, we're going to all be in one big boat. And I'm hoping we can avoid that as much as possible. And so if we can continue to continue to take the lead in terms of being conservative, with this one being precautionary, being very careful with this long-lived rockfish species that's extremely hard to rebuild once it gets into that status. It can, as we all know, affect so many other fisheries in a very detrimental way that it just screams to me to be very cautious and set the example for the other states, so that we can avoid getting in trouble again. I'll be gone by the time anything bad happens, but I just, having as many of us on the call here today have lived through what it takes to deal with this critter when it's overfished, we just do not want to go back there.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I think that those are definitely important considerations. Whitney, I'm looking to you again because the hands seem to be.
I'm still seeing Rhett's hand up, but that might be a legacy, but I look to Rhett to confirm. And then Corey and Steve just raised their hand in that order.
Thank you.
Yeah, 100% legacy, other than, I agree. I want to see biological data coming in on yellow eye, but I don't want to jeopardize anything we've currently got.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, Steve,
go ahead, Corey.
Steve, go first. I'm just going to respond. Brett just mentioned part of it, but what Larry said earlier, but please, Steve, go first.
You want me to go?
Yes, sir, please.
Oh, so dumb question, I guess. So do we have to are we tasked with getting our all of the our ideas out right now prior
No.
to the next council meeting?
No. Yeah, no, this again, yeah, this is just kicking it off.
Okay.
We're
like way early, right?
Yeah, we are early in the process.
Yeah.
And that's why like we don't even have and why I flagged like the data are preliminary. The biological data are still being error checked from 2025. Those haven't even been pushed into the system, so those could change our estimates of catch. So yeah, we're early in the process. This is just to get you guys thinking about these ideas, and then be able to talk to your respective communities and groups to get their input. And I'll end up with next steps, so you'll have an idea of sort of the timing for when we'll all come back and look at some of the, at least we're taking down the ideas that you're sharing here, and if you have some additional ones, there'd be opportunity for that to come out at the next meeting for sure. And when I say next meeting, I was meaning the WDFW one.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I think what Steve said though was before the next council meeting. I think that we do want the options should be on the table by the April meeting, right? And then final commissions by the June meeting.
Okay. Well, I'm hearing a lot of ideas and, but in agreement with all of them. And so, but if you're writing things down, that kind of makes me a little nervous, because sometimes people write stuff down and then that's a starting point where you go from. But I'm sure we'll have more time to interact and get our ideas in there, because I'm with everybody about starting very cautiously, but what that actually means when it comes right down to it might be four different people have four different ideas of what cautious means. So, but okay, we'll get there. So thanks for that.
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, there's time, but as Corey said, by April, but we'll be able to have that interaction and where we can share more of the data from 2025 and give you even some preliminary ideas of what some different options might look like. So
yeah, Laura, not to take too much time, but just a number of you said the value of getting the data, but Larry, one reason why it's rebuilt 60 years faster was based on the assumption of what they call steepness, which is the model way of describing how fast the stock increases. And so with this model in particular, and others in our group and that could explain it better, but without the data coming in, what the model's been doing is just, I don't want to say pretending, but assuming the stock has been increasing at that rate all this time. And so there's just really been not a lot of feedback from actual like how old are the fish, how big are the fish. So that's one of the main reasons why it rebuilt so much faster. Things were assumed to be a lot less, rockfish in general, a lot less productive when we started than now. And the question is, how real is it? Is the question. And just one other thing, I'm hearing and not surprised by everyone wanting to be cautious here. So I'll just point back to the other thought though, and is again learning from the canary experience. And I'd say yellow eye off the top of my head is a bit different than canary in terms of the trawl fisheries don't take as much. But yeah, and Butch and Phil's of like, we need to watch what everyone's doing and making sure it's fair and we don't get left behind and being cautious while others are not.
yeah, thanks, Corey. Yeah, I'll just share too that one of the challenges And this isn't to sway how people are thinking, but just to provide some context that because of the differences in how the states approached allowing canary in their respective fisheries, and we were more conservative when we were looking at the allocation question a couple of years ago. It was challenging, and that's where I do think it's really important to look at the character of each fishery, because we were looking at like an average catch for Washington over a period of time, and it was being interpreted as Washington not needing or utilizing what was available or even needing what was available. But because, and I think rightly so, we had a very precautionary approach, our catch, we had essentially tied the fishery's hands behind its back. And so just flagging that as you go forward, those of you that'll be involved in this process, that, yeah, just emphasize the need to really look at the regulation structure relative to the catch, and across each of the states. It's really difficult to just look at catch and interpret what need or what a fishery could or couldn't utilize. So, that, Steve?
Oh, sorry to bother you. One last time. So is yellow eye, would that be something that would be managed in sub areas like on the coast, like area 1, 2, 3, and 4 have different objectives and maybe rules in each sub area? I know that's probably not popular, but you know, we have different days for halibut and whatnot. Is that something that could be entertained also down the road? Like if different areas had different ideas, objectives for, you know, the different people's fisheries, is that something that could be on the table? I know it's not a popular thing. It's easier to have a rule for the coast, but
that's right. Yeah, I think you've got a good handle on that dynamic. Generally, it's easier for the angling public when the rules are the same coast-wide. But with canary, we did start out with a 1 fish bag limit, initially just in area 1 and 2, and then went to a 2 fish. So it was staggered, and the North Coast was the last to have, you know, canary open up. So it's not impossible to do it by area. I think it's just a matter of looking at, you know, yellow eye and what are the trade-offs between, you know, a bag limit coast-wide of Washington or just a particular area within Washington, or on particular days, like Dave's idea of yellow eye only on halibut days. So you've got some, what I would say, limitation there relative to another fishery that's also fishing in deep water. Yeah.
Okay. Well, while you're writing ideas down, maybe you could scribble that one as a possibility of if the areas don't agree, you know, because I have some reservations about if it's only open on halibut days, and there's a lot of halibut days. Well, those are going to be, in my mind, high impact days for yellow eye. You know, maybe in different areas the fishing dynamics are a little different, but anyway.
Yep.
I still love you, Dave. Thanks, Lorna.
Yeah, you're welcome, Steve. Okay. Yeah, just looking at time, just kind of going to the last sort of bin of alternatives. And again, this is just the routine ones that I'd mentioned before. So we have copper, quillback, and vermilion rockfish, where we currently have no retention in May, June, and July. And that was based on a presumed low stock size coming out of the assessments, low productivity, and fairly vulnerable to the fishery. There's, I guess, lot of question marks about the biology and stock status of these fish. But regardless, we do want to look at our management objective performance relative to the harvest guidelines, and then just maintaining that biological data collection that we currently have. And then other routine could just be if folks have ideas, or if we develop some ideas coming out of the analysis that's done for some other options. So yeah, just to recap here, these are the suite of proposed alternatives at this point. Again, removing the 30 fathom lingcod depth restriction in May, closing deep water opportunity for lingcod in the latter part of September, evaluating some limited yellow eye rockfish retention, and then other routine, just everything else kind of falls under routine. And then in terms of next steps for 2026.
Lorna?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just real quick, I still see Steve might be a legacy, and then I also see Phil put his hand up.
Okay, I missed that, so thanks. Yeah, so Steve, is your legacy hand?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. Okay, Phil?
Keep nagging on this. The potential to straighten out that closure at Ledbetter, that 6 mile block. You did mention it earlier in your discussion, but I don't want to lose sight of that, or to think that if it's not on this list that it's no longer being considered. I did talk a little bit with Butch about it, and of course I talked with many of you about it in September and again in November, but I'm hoping that, and I know we got some favorable perspective from the NOAA folks that it wouldn't be a heavy lift. So I just don't want to lose sight of that.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Phil. It is in the text that is guiding the team's analysis and our analysis internally. I just didn't really capture that here. But yeah, it's that 6 mile block that I referred to as the wonky bit of the line that will be evaluated, like how to streamline that and make that just a little bit clearer. And
thanks. I'm just sorry to be a nag about it.
No, that's fine. It's good because sometimes we don't put something on the slide and it's because we totally lost sight of it. So I will say I can be guilty of that. So it's good to check. So yeah, then kind of from where we're at now, as I mentioned, we'll be doing the analysis of these alternatives over the next several months. We don't yet have dates for, and I have in quotes, a March, April WDFW public meeting will be the second one. That could fall in and around the March council meeting. And again, I won't be around, so I'm trying to leave this open, but there will be the same kind of public news release distribution via email, so to get word out to folks. Then the council will be meeting in April in Portland, the 7th through the 12th. That's where they adopt the final harvest specification for the annual catch limits. And that's where they'll adopt the preliminary preferred management measure. So as Corey was saying, that's where we do want to have folks input prior to that, what mix of yellow eye opportunity and regulations. That's what will go before the council for consideration and adopting as a preliminary. After that, we can come back if needed with another public meeting to consider what those preliminary preferred management measures are. If they're, I say, just consideration for any additional ideas or tweaks, I guess, maybe to what those preferred measures are. And that would then feed into the June council meeting. That's the 11th through the 16th in Spokane. And that is where the council would take final action and set in place what those management measures would be. So at that point, it's kind of a done deal then for 27 and 28. And the new rules would go into effect the following January at the federal and state level. So with that, that kind of concludes all the slides we had. I will say I've got on this last one, emails for the folks. If you have any questions, you want to follow up. Oh, sorry, maybe I didn't give you enough time. Phil?
Yeah, on that schedule of what comes next, I know others, you and Whitney and others will remember exactly how much, when we're doing groundfish. Was it March or April, or both? I'm worried about waiting until the March, April timeframe for the next WDFW public meeting. I'm just thinking that, if there was any way to do it in the latter part of February. Again, not remembering which one of those two meetings we're doing has a heavy groundfish lift. But I don't want to get our WDFW public meeting so close to the council meeting that we don't leave ourselves any time. So, I mean, if we're leaving here today, here on December 10th, and we're not going to talk again until March at a WDFW public meeting number 2, that's concerning to me.
Yeah, I think Whitney could speak to that. The March versus April.
Well, why when he's doing that, I think Lorna, I think it's a bit confusing the way you labeled it, but what you said earlier was that we'd have being more meetings to prepare for March, April, but you didn't want to say when because you're retiring, but we were thinking more having the next one in January or February is what your earlier slide said.
Yeah, typically we kick off in January. So this one is early. So it is making it feel very protracted to the action, the next step. And that's why I have March, April in quotes. I think there's latitude to have that next meeting when it makes the most sense. Because we don't want to box ourselves into where we're so tight we don't have time to respond to stakeholder input.
Hey, Lorna, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Mic issues, had to put headphones in. To Phil's question, April will be the heavier groundfish specs lift because, as they said, that's when we consider the preliminary preferred management measures. March, this upcoming cycle, will be a weird one because March will have to consider the widow stock assessment since that hasn't been adopted yet, and the second supplemental review is scheduled in January. So there will be some groundfish specs related work in March, but it's largely just going to be the result of that widow stock assessment review and any specification values that have to come out of that and be adopted. But the bulk of this that we're talking about today is going to come in April. There is an opportunity to give the council a brief update on the analysis the GMT has been doing over winter in March, but that's meant to be very limited in scope and really just if any issues have come up, get additional council guidance. I'll also just flag too that the GMT has scheduled our overwinter meeting February 2nd to 6th. So we'll have an opportunity to present our analysis to the rest of the team at that point too on the Washington recreational fishery, and have some discussion with the other states and their recreational analysis they've been doing. And everyone is welcome to listen into that as well. It's publicly posted on the council. You can find the link to listen in there on the webpage, and definitely always invite people to listen in on that. So the idea of having a Washington public meeting after that, maybe late February, makes sense because we can have that discussion after the GMT meeting, but just brainstorming.
Thanks, Whitney. I know Larry's had his hand up, so I'll give him a chance to jump in here, Corey.
If Corey's got something on this, go ahead, Corey.
Oh, just quick. I think the other consideration, and we need that's possible time frame, but the we can start working on the analysis and how we would think about it. But as Lorna highlighted, there does come a time in January or maybe February when the data updates, and that can really change things like average weight, which can change the answer more than you want it to. So I think that's just the other we have to we can start working on how to analyze it, but waiting for that final 2025 numbers is probably what we want to do.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder, Corey. And then Larry.
So is this your last meeting, Lorna?
It is. This is my last public meeting ever for my career.
Well, I just wanted to publicly share that I've had the distinct privilege of serving both as a coworker of yours and also a member of the public. And, the simple fact that you're as dedicated today as you have ever been is a testimony to the attitude and the work ethic you brought to this job. And I really appreciate you. Your commitment to the resource, to the state of Washington, and to the citizens has been unmatched. So these are big shoes, Claudia. But I look forward to working with you. And Lorna, I wish you the absolute best of luck. And thank you for all the years.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, now you're going to make me tear up, and I don't want to do that, but very much appreciate your kind words. And yeah, I'll just say it's been an honor working with WDFW and the great team of people. And I would say, yeah, I just have really deep appreciation for all of you on the call today, the stakeholders. And we couldn't do what we do as well as we do without the good conversations and open conversations. So yeah, thanks. Thank you. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna miss everyone. Let's see. So, barring any other questions, I think we can call this a wrap. And yeah, you guys can look forward to hearing from Steve.
I just want to say copy what Larry said. That was really nice, and everything he said is 100% true. Thank you. Glad that you helped me over the years, and hopefully we helped you too. But I'm gonna be sorry to see you go, Lorna.
As we all will.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Lorna, you've just been fantastic. Just echoing what everybody else has said. We're gonna miss you, but at the same time, wish you the very best.
Yes.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Steve. Butch?
Well, I got to barbecue you at the November meeting, so I won't do it too bad. But I echo what everyone said, Lorna. And the nice thing about you're a great communicator and made things very simple. To those of us who are not as quick as others in the groundfish world, you took the complication out of it and made it in plain English. And you're one of the few that we consider when Lorna says no, that she's looked everywhere to say yes, but and there's no argument. When Lorna says no, it means no, and that is an honor not many people have. in the department, and you have it. And so you give yourself a big pat on the back, and thank you for all you've done and all the years you spent doing what you've done. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Butch. Appreciate that. Good words, all of you. Right. Yeah, I think we're done. Yeah, I see the comments. Yeah, thanks, Brett. Appreciate that. I know your input has been invaluable as well. So, good night, everyone, and good luck.
Good luck.
Thanks
Good
very much.
We'll take it. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.